you can use our question and answer box, and I will be monitoring that as Jessica is going through our presentation, and we'll take a couple breaks to answer your questions. So please send those in as they come along. If you're having any technical issues, send those to me as well in the question and answer box, and we will try to assist you. We're going to leave some time at the end too to allow you to use audio to ask any questions. If you don't feel comfortable typing your answers in, we're happy to stick around and unmute you so that you can ask those to the group. And then one last thing that I wanted to note for you, you can answer these poll questions and it will be anonymous. So if you're not comfortable sharing personal information, just know that you're welcome to participate in the polls if you would like to, and those will be private.
All right, great. So, and Eleanor, if you could let me know if we're still having technical issues. It seems like we might be, but I think we're good to go. So, so again, I apologize for the rocky start there, folks. So we are Equipped for Equality. We are a federally funded nonprofit organization, and the Special Education Clinic, again, provides free legal advice and information to parents of students with disabilities. So you've answered this poll, the main reason you're attending here today. And we want to give you some information and advice about this unprecedented time that we're in. So first and foremost, best advice we can give is to take care of you and yourself and your family. We are here to help you if you have questions, if you need assistance, but it's important to remember that even though, you know, schools are doing remote learning, there's a lot on the parents right now, but you're not a teacher. The school doesn't expect you to know how to be a teacher overnight. And the most important thing is always to take care of you and yourself and your family. That should be paramount right now. So, so getting into some information for you though is we have some special education law basic terms. So the IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's a federal law that is followed by all of the states, and then there are rules in every state about how to implement that law. So what IDEA is it guarantees students with disabilities a free and appropriate public education. In order for students to receive free and appropriate public education, which we often call just FAPE for short, the student needs to learn or derive some benefit from his or her education. That doesn't mean that they have to receive what is best for them always, but just what they need to learn or to get something out of their schooling. And that is generally done through an IEP. You might have heard of that term, an individualized education program. So just like it sounds, IEPs are supposed to be catered specifically, individually to a student. And IEPs can provide for related services for a student. So whatever the student needs to benefit from their education, if they need physical therapy, occupational therapy, social work, you know, and anything that they need, that can be provided through an IEP, and those are called related services. Excuse me. And another term that you're going to hear more and more often because of the remote learning and school closures is compensatory education. Sometimes we refer to that as Comp Ed for short. Now, this is when your student or your child might be eligible to receive extra help or services if there are any missed services during the school closures, anytime, but especially now during the school closures, or if your child regresses or has some sort of setback on their IEP goals because of the school closures or because of a lack of services that are being provided right now. So we'll talk a little bit more about Comp Ed as we go along here. So during the COVID-19 remote learning, the U.S. Department of Education has put out guidance saying that if schools are providing education services to any of the students, general education students, they have to also provide special education services, meaning that they have to follow your child's IEP as much as possible. Just because everything is remote doesn't mean that they don't have to follow the IEP. And in Illinois, all the schools went to remote learning on March 31st of this year. So just so we can get an idea of what your experience is, I have a poll here for you to do about whether you've gotten a remote learning plan from your child's school or teacher. So if you just want to take a minute and answer that and let us know, you know, whether you've gotten a plan at all. Gotten a few answers here. That's a little more than half of you that answered. So we'll go ahead and end there and share the results. I know maybe not everybody got to answer, but we just wanted to get an idea. So it sounds like, you know, about half and half people have either gotten plans or not gotten plans from the school or the teacher. And you should have gotten a remote learning plan. Of course, you know, schools have had to get those together and then get them out to families. So if your child has received remote learning services, we kind of want to know what kind of services they've received. So we have another poll here, and on this one you can answer as many that apply to you. If they've received more than one service or no services at all, you know, you can just enter that, and I'll give you a couple minutes to answer that one. All right, so it looks like, I'll share this in a second here. It looks like some people are receiving speech and social work. Quite a few are receiving no related services, which does concern us, and we certainly want to address that. So answers have slowed down, so I'm going to go ahead and end that and share the results with you. So one thing we want to make clear is that if you're not receiving services that your child should be receiving, you can call our helpline. We again provide free legal advice and information to parents of students with disabilities. We're here to help navigate you through. So if you're not receiving services, your child's not receiving services that they should be receiving, give us a call. I mean, we can help navigate you through. Of course, communicate with your school, and we'll get a little bit more into the recommendations about, you know, how to approach this situation here in a moment too. But keep in mind that we are always here to help you. So speaking of services, what services your child should be receiving right now? They should be receiving whatever can help them work towards their IEP goals. So even though we are remote, they are still supposed to be receiving services, and that might make it more difficult to receive the services in the exact same way they were before, but the school is supposed to work to, you know, make sure that the students are receiving some services. So if they were in their IEP to have an aide, a one-on-one aide, they should still be having that. You know, if there are web meetings or however the teachers are communicating, that aide should still be there. You know, that's the kind of thing that should be happening. Modification for time on tests for students that are taking tests. We realize that some younger kids especially aren't being given tests at this time, but older kids, they should be receiving modifications if they're in their IEPs, and then the general therapies. You know, hopefully some of your kids are receiving speech and OT, and that's great. We do also recognize that, you know, it's probably harder to give physical therapy if that is supposed to be like an in-person therapy. So we're going to give you some information on how to keep track of that kind of thing in order to address it in the future. So again, social work, counseling services, not really, you know, no reason those can't be provided. Again, maybe not in the exact same way, but talking to your school and trying to figure out how to get your child the services they're supposed to be getting should be happening. Assistive technology like computers or special learning programs, if that's what your child needs to learn in school. If your child is expected to have access to the internet or a computer and you don't have that, definitely you can contact your school and let them know, and they should be assisting you in getting access to that technology. So again, if that's not happening, talk to your school, call us if you need us. So Eleanor, how are we looking on questions? Should we take a moment, or are we?
We
okay,
are getting a couple questions, really good questions. It looks like some of this stuff we'll answer throughout the presentation, but we got a question: is a parent able to revise an IEP during the pandemic? And the answer is yes, you can ask for an IEP meeting, and as far as we're aware, schools are holding IEP meetings remotely, either by phone or by video. And Jessica will talk about that in a little bit. We got another question asking, do services offered with YouTube videos count, and do worksheets count? That's a good question. What's considered services, I think, will depend a lot based on individual circumstances and your child's needs. And so maybe we can talk a little bit more specifically later on in this presentation, and also perhaps one-on-one, depending on what's in your child's IEP. We also got a question about asking for a reduced workload and revised grading. Since there is no one-on-one instruction at this time, can I ask for those revisions through an IEP meeting at this time? So again, you can ask for an IEP meeting to discuss what services your child needs and any additions or modifications that should be made based on the current situation. Thanks for those questions. We will take a couple more breaks throughout the presentation, so feel free to keep sending those as they come up for you.
Yeah, and I think we will, even those questions, we'll touch a little bit more on the subject matter of those here in just a few minutes as well. So great. Okay, so here's an example of a remote learning plan that you might have seen, but unfortunately this one is just not sufficient. There's just not enough information. So if you did receive a remote learning plan, and it looks a little bit like this, you know, academic instruction with just, you know, a few times a day or per month, or, you know, something like that, you can ask for a more specific schedule, ask for a schedule, or ask for more specific minutes, you know, 60 minutes per week, however much is supposed to be in the IEP. And again, your student should be receiving what's in the IEP, but you know, that can be modified, and we don't even mean that you have to change the IEP, but you and the school can agree that for now, this is what's going to happen as far as the services that your child is going to receive. And in fact, we do recommend that you don't agree to any lesser services. So you don't agree to change the IEP so that your student is getting less services just because of remote learning. So you can make a temporary, you know, change without actually changing the IEP. So that's what we recommend that you do right now if you need to. So here we have a few hypothetical students with some sort of common issues, different issues that we've heard about. And so we'll just go through those and kind of what we recommend. So Tyle is a third grader, a hypothetical third grader with autism. He's in a separate special education class for core and academic classes. And so his teacher sends tip sheets and things to do. But as a parent, you know, I have to act as the teacher. So he should be getting speech and OT and social work. There's no formal remote learning plan that I've been given. He's not getting any related services, and he has behaviors when he has to call into Google Meets. He's supposed to call twice a week for 30 minutes, but it's just to like play games as a class, not for specialized instruction. So he's not really getting any teaching, just worksheets. And I just don't know what to do. So if someone were to call in, you know, to the clinic and we were to talk to them, we would give them some advice, but we would also love to hear from any parents about anything that's worked for you, any tactics or steps that you've taken. You know, if through these examples, if you have anything that's worked for you, we'd love to hear that. So I mean, you can type it into the chat box or the Q&A box. We'd love to hear those as well. So Eleanor will take a look if you have anything there. Sorry about that. So I'm going to start with the most general recommendation, and that is talk to the school, talk to the teacher, request a remote learning plan, excuse me, and talk about what services he's supposed to be getting through his IEP and how those are going to be provided, even if it's not in the exact way that he would normally receive those services. Just gonna check the. Okay. Looks like some people have a couple questions in the chat, so we'll try to get to those as well. Okay, so another common hypothetical would be Isabel. She would be a 6th grader with a specific learning disability with a multisensory reading program. So this is a little more specific. Some of you might not have heard of some of these things. So I, as the parent, I don't get an outline schedule about how it's going to, or excuse me, about it, schedule. I don't think her outline schedule is going to be enough to meet her learning needs or to follow the Wilson reading program, which is what she is supposed to be following. So I want to know what I can do. And again, the beginning general advice is going to be to contact the school, to request additional time, to request a more detailed plan, to talk, you know, to request an IEP meeting if necessary, to talk to the team to figure out what the school can provide in order to meet her needs. If the schedule is not meeting her needs, then you can ask the school to provide additional instruction or, you know, a better plan than they have provided. And Eleanor, feel free to stop me if I need to, if there are any chats that we need to address there.
Yeah, we got one question about remote learning plans, so I just wanted to address that really quickly. Somebody asked if they should have received an individualized remote learning plan, or is it okay that they just received something from the district that covered the student body as a whole? So they received a paragraph that said, your child should receive what's in their IEP about 2 or 3 times a week. I think so it's important to know that everybody's remote learning plan is going to look a little bit different. And I think one of the purposes of the remote learning plan is to make sure that children are getting services. So if your school district is making that happen just by following the IEP itself, and that is the remote learning plan, I think that's your way of knowing what to expect that your child should be receiving. And so I don't think you need to be worried that you don't have an individualized remote learning plan.
Great, okay. So we've got a last hypothetical student here, Juan, and he's a 10th grade student with an emotional disability. He's often has defiant and aggressive behaviors. So he has short check-ins with the social worker twice a week. And so he has to log into the Google Classroom by himself to get his work and to turn in homework. But he doesn't want to do the remote classes or his remote work. So what can I do? What should I ask for from the school? And again, this is, I mean, we're open to discussion on this. If anyone has come across anything like that, please let us know in the chat. Our general recommendation, again, is going to be talk to the school, try to come up with a plan that where everyone can work together for him. And again, an IEP is an individualized education plan. So if Juan needs, you know, more time, if he needs to maybe only do 2 out of 3 of the homework assignments, you know, if it's causing a lot of stress at home and really triggering his aggressive behaviors, you know, whatever can be done now is acceptable. You know, there's no reason that the school can't do that. And that's really, you know, working with the team. So if you think something as a parent, you know your child the best. So if you think something would work for him, you can talk to the school and try to ask them to help you implement that, you know, whatever idea that is. All right. So one thing we really want to talk about is the fact that you should not waive any of your rights. We do not advise you to sign any form that says that you are waiving your child's rights to special education or compensatory education. And please feel free to contact our helpline. The number will be at the end of the presentation here. And if you are asked to sign a form, or if you have already signed a form and you're just not sure, you know, whether it was something waiving your rights or, you know, what it was, if you have any concerns at all, give us a call. We can help you, you know, take a look at it and let you know whether we would advise that you sign it or not. But generally, if it's something asking that you waive services now, if a form asks that you waive your child receiving any of the services he or she is supposed to receive in his IEP now during remote learning, or compensatory education, and again, we will get a little more into that in just a minute. If it's asking you to waive that at a later date, you know, anything like that, we do not advise that you sign that. So here's an example of a waiver. And as you can see, it doesn't say in big bold letters, I waive my rights. So you really have to read these. They're gonna look a little more like a legal document. So this one says, if a parent or guardian declines to consent, the services will not be made up or provided in a compensatory manner. However, the school district will consider requests for alternative service delivery depending on each child's unique circumstances. Contact your child's case manager or principal to discuss available options. So this is basically saying, if you don't consent to remote learning, then we're not going to provide compensatory education for the remote learning period. So we wouldn't advise that you sign this. You can also, I mean, one option is to mark through this paragraph and initial it and then consent to the remote learning. We just want to make sure that you're not waiving your right to seek compensatory education in the future or receive any services at this time. And so schools really shouldn't probably be sending out any of these requests for these type of waivers, but we have seen a few. ISB, the Illinois State Board of Education, has issued guidance saying that the schools shouldn't be requesting these kind of waivers, but there might be some out there and there might be floating around, we're not sure. So please, again, give us a call if you come across anything like this or you have a question about anything that you did sign. So just so we can get an idea if any of you have come across this before, we do have a poll here. Just a second. Oh, I'm sorry if that last poll was still up here. Okay. So if you've been asked to sign a paper, you know, let us know. Oh, I'm seeing several no's, so that's good. That's what we want to hear. At least one yes. All right, so I think we have a good amount of votes there. So we're very happy to see so many of those no's there. I'm going to end and share this with you. So it looks like all but one of the people who answered have not been asked to sign or signed any sort of waiver, so that's great. For that person who did say yes, you can certainly call our clinic helpline and we can walk you through whether you need to do anything. Don't panic. It's again, you know, everything's going to be fine. We probably want to address that with the school. All right. So I'm going to ask Eleanor, should we keep going, or we have any questions we need to address?
I'm going to just jump in with one question.
Sure.
We received asking for goals. How should the school be evaluating the end of the year goals or benchmarks? Can the school say they're not able to evaluate? I would advise that they should be evaluating goals and give an update on progress based on how your child is doing on worksheets. They can check in with you through phone calls or Google Meet, a parent interview. So it might not be the same type of progress monitoring that you would see if your child was in school, but you can be flexible and creative and come up with other ways to monitor progress.
Great, okay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about compensatory education. So as I said before, compensatory education, or Comp Ed for short, are extra educational services that can make up for past missed services or past inappropriate services. So an example would be if your child was not receiving any services during the remote learning days, he or she may be eligible to receive Comp Ed. It's not a one-on-one, so if she or he missed 30 minutes of speech that they were supposed to get and they didn't get, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will for sure get 30 minutes to make up for that. It's more of a comprehensive test. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So the goal of Comp Ed is to put a student in the place he or she would have been if they had been receiving FAPE. So an example, as I said, would be additional speech therapy to make up for missed speech services, excuse me. So here's where, and I'm gonna say this multiple times from now on, it's important to keep a good record if you wanna try to get Comp Ed, which is for extra services or help. So tracking what's going on is really important, and we will give you a little bit more information on tracking, but we want to be able to look at where your student is and then where they are if they miss any services. So if there's any sort of regression, then that's a place where they might be eligible to get compensatory education. So tracking important information during remote learning. We recommend that you keep a record of everything. And you know, some parents already keep a notebook with what's going on, you know, what they've gotten from the school. Just as general recommendations, we recommend that you write it down. But if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So if you had a telephone conversation with someone at the school, send a follow-up email and say, you know, I'm just following up on our conversation from this afternoon when we talked about my child receiving extra speech therapy, you know, whatever it is, that we've got a record. And you want to always, any communication with the school, you want that to be in writing. So if you're having technology or behavior problems with your child, if you are requesting any sort of IEP meeting or any, you know, anything at all like that, put that in writing. And you want to, if at all possible, track the time on remote learning work with and without the school and teachers' help. So if you are basically teaching your student, you know, keep track of the time you spent, how much work was done, whether your child had any behavior issues, particularly if they have a disability that has some sort of behavior problems. Tracking progress or regression, falling behind. So if you notice your child regressing, like if they're, for example, they seem to be reading at a lower rate than they were when remote learning started, you know, make note of that. But just tracking how they're doing over time will also help you, you know, see that regression and show it as well. So we do have some sample tracking forms. I believe that we sent out an email before the webinar with a link to our website, and we have some information on COVID-19 remote learning resources there, and we have some tracking forms that you can use. These are modifiable. I mean, you can change these up however you want. These are just samples, but some good examples are to use the distance learning. So tracking, you know, what your child or your student is doing, how much time they spent, you know, what subject it is. That's a good idea to keep track of all of that. You can track with these forms communication or contact with the school. So if there are emails with the teachers, you know, Zoom meetings, IEP meetings, whatever it is, this is a good place to track it. I always recommend to parents that you, if you email especially a lot, you can make a separate folder in your email to just for school stuff, and that way you can move stuff in there, but then putting it on the tracking form will make it easier to find later. And we also have a behavior log tracking form. And again, this is, I mean, you can change this so it's individualized to your child or student. If they're having any sort of behaviors, you can change these 1, 2s, and 3s, you know, to different things. But these are just examples about, you know, what you might track if your child is having any sort of behavior issues. Excuse me. All right. And we'll check in with Eleanor here. Should we keep going, Eleanor, or you have any questions?
We got a great question about compensatory services. Somebody asked, would asking for extra services through compensatory services, I think they mean, would that mean reducing instructional time in order to receive that extra service? That's a good question. Compensatory services should be in addition to anything that your child needs. And so there's not one specific way that compensatory services can be delivered. It's unique and individualized based on your child. So sometimes it means the school day needs to be extended for a few minutes of services after school, or there are other ways to make that work, but it doesn't necessarily need to interrupt your child's instructional time. It should only be in addition to. Hopefully that answers your question. Feel free to follow up if you have additional questions about that.
Great, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about timelines for IEPs and evaluations. So remote learning days are school days, just something to keep in mind. So if you ask for an IEP meeting, the school's supposed to answer in 10 calendar days. If you ask for an evaluation, they've got 14 school days to answer. If they agree to the evaluation, they're supposed to complete that in 60 days. But you do want, we want to keep in mind here that some of the assessments might not be able to be done remotely. And if there's something, it's still being figured out how students are going to be like observed in a classroom setting, if that's what the assessment needs to be. But we would recommend that you as part of the IEP team, make sure that it's explained to you if you're told why an assessment or a test can't be done remotely. Schools are able to figure out ways to do things that aren't the normal way, which is what this remote learning is all about. So, don't just give up that no evaluations can be done right now. It's important to keep in mind that some tests can be done, but that some might need to be postponed or done in a different way. But generally, you certainly can still ask for IEP meetings and ask for evaluations, because remote learning days are school days. Those act of God days from the 17th to the 30th, when the pandemic was starting and the shelter-in-place orders were starting, they don't technically count as school days, but anything after that were in school days. So the possibility of getting compensatory education services. As I said, those act of God days, they don't count as school days. So, for services that your child would have received during those days, that's probably not going to be something that you can get just for that block of time. But every day after that is a school day. So again, it's important to keep track of what they've been getting. And if you haven't been tracking, that's okay. Everyone is navigating this for the first time. Just start now, that's fine. But you can certainly bring up compensatory education at an IEP meeting. And it might not be something that the school can provide immediately. It might be something that they can provide in the future. But the goal is, if your child is not receiving services or didn't receive services for a period of time that were school days, he or she might be entitled to compensatory education going forward. And that's something to address at an IEP meeting. And again, that's something that we're all navigating, and that our helpline is open. We're here to help you work through that if that's something that you're needing to do. So, protecting your child's rights, a couple of main do's and don'ts or things to take away from this webinar. You should ask for an IEP meeting. They can be done by phone or video conference to talk about a distance learning plan. Your student doesn't have to be having issues, or your child doesn't have to be having issues, just to talk about their learning plan. You can have an IEP meeting to address how things are going to go, how things are going to be set up, and what the schedule is going to be, and that kind of thing. You certainly can do that. You, excuse me, you don't want to sign any waivers. We went over that in detail, but again, don't want to sign any waivers of your child's educational rights. You don't want to agree to take away or cut any services just because they can't do those services technically right now in the same way that they would before. So but conversely, on the other hand, you can agree to distance learning plans without agreeing that the plan provides FAPE. So you can agree to a plan that isn't exactly like what the IEP says, but that doesn't mean that you have to agree that is FAPE, that your child's receiving a free and appropriate public education with that distance learning plan. So, I mean, the main thing is working with the school to get your child what they need right now, while not waiving your rights to ask for compensatory education to make up for any regression or any services that they didn't receive right now. And tracking things is one of the best things you can do to help you in the future. So trying your hardest to keep track of how your child's doing with his or her work, tracking what they're doing, tracking what services they're receiving, and talking or emailing your child's teacher if your child is having trouble, asking for an IEP meeting if you're just not satisfied with what's going on, you know, with your child's learning plan or schedule. And most importantly, maybe, is don't be too hard on yourself. Again, this is unprecedented territory for everyone. We are all trying to do the best we can. So don't beat yourself up if you're not, you know, teaching your child for 12 hours a day every day. You're doing the best you can, and the school should work with you to get your child what they need right now. So this is our special education clinic helpline. Again, Eleanor and I are staff attorneys in the special education clinic at Equip for Equality. So we are all, along with our colleagues, are there to give you free legal advice and information. You can call the helpline. You can send us an email at contactus@equipforequality.org, or you can jump on our website at equipforequality.org, and we do have additional information and remote learning resources on our website as well. You can give us a call if you need any navigation help for that as well. All right, so we are right at an hour. We did have some technical issues there at the beginning, and again, I apologize for that, but we are going to stay on here for several minutes and answer some more questions. So if you have to get off here at the hour, thank you very much for joining us. And if not, we'll jump over to Eleanor so she can go through some questions.
Sure. So we got a question about whether remote learning days should count towards the student's grades or towards their progress reporting. So remember that during this presentation, Jessica said that the IDEA is still in effect. There are not waivers saying that students don't need to be working towards their IEP goals. So in other words, students' IEP should be followed, and that means that you should expect your child to make progress, which means that the school should continue to monitor progress. And so if you're hearing from your school district that they can't do progress reporting, please do call our helpline so that we can help you kind of work through that problem and figure out the best way for you to communicate with your school to resolve the issue. With respect to grades and how those are impacted, they should not give a worse grade than your child already has, but they can use continued work through remote learning to improve your child's grade.
That's a great question too. And I think that's, I'll just jump in to say, I think that has confused a lot of parents, because I know a lot of districts have said that, and that is because the ISB guidance is that students' grades shouldn't be adversely affected by their remote learning. But that doesn't mean the school shouldn't be providing services and educational opportunities for your child. So yeah, Eleanor answered that great.
We also got a question, what does the parent do if the school says they cannot provide services now through the end of remote learning? We'd like for you to call us if that's the case, because it's probably easier to discuss the specific facts of your situation. If anybody has a question that they wanted to ask but didn't want to type it out, there's a little option at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. So feel free to raise your hand if you're comfortable sharing your message or asking your question through audio, and we can call on you. If I didn't get to your question, I hope that I was able to sort of answer everyone's questions, but if I didn't get to it, please feel free to type it in again or call our helpline.
Yeah, I am seeing some chats. I just want to add, because I think we do have some educators on here, and communicating with your child's teacher is, I mean, I think that that's the first step, you know, and I know that a lot of people have problems. It doesn't work out, but we do also want to, you know, support our educators here who are actually, you know, doing everything that they possibly can. So I think that that's a good thing to do, is always try to communicate with your child's teacher, or IEP team, you know, whatever that means, if it's the special education contact person that you need to like communicate with your school. And we're always here to help you, but I think that's a great place to start, because you know, we want to assume that they want to do what's best for your kids. Well, Eleanor's looking at a couple more. We do have, I should have done this before I let everybody go. We do have a satisfaction survey for you that I'm going to launch, and just keep in mind that your answers here are anonymous, and we don't share this with the with all of you at the end. This is just for our purposes. We're also very open to feedback. If there's anything you know, that you'd like more information on, type it in the chat box. We'd love to see that. And I want to apologize again for the technical issues at the beginning there. This is our first one, so we're trying to get it, thought we had everything working, but unfortunately, sometimes technology doesn't work for us. So we really appreciate everybody attending, and we hope it was helpful.
I'm going to jump in. There's one last comment in the chat box. One parent reports that that her child's school district is only providing 1 hour per day of instruction, and is asking the parents to provide at least 2 more hours of instruction in addition. We really encourage you to use the tracking form that you should be receiving through an email. Tomorrow, Zoom will send one of those follow-up emails to say thank you for participating. And in that, you should have access to these tracking forms. So if for some reason you're not able to provide that instruction, you want to definitely record that, whether you know, whatever the reason is. It might be because you're at work or unavailable to assist, or you know, it might just be the content of the work. Whatever the reason, doesn't make a difference. You should just record whether or not you were able to work with your child to deliver that instruction. All right,
We're just-
we got one more question. They're sort of trickling in. So
Yeah.
thank you everyone for your patience if you're still with us. We got a question, when is it appropriate to ask for comp ed? We strongly recommend that you wait until school resumes because there's so much uncertainty right now. And you just want to keep on tacking time on your tracking form for now. And probably what you're going to ask to receive is something that you would ask for once school resumes anyways. At this point, you're not at risk of losing the opportunity to ask for comp ed. You don't need to do it by the end of this school year.
All right, folks. So again, I think we're going to wrap it up. Again, if your question wasn't answered, or if you need to discuss your child's situation, please feel free to contact our helpline or contact us online. And our special education clinic is happy to talk to you and give you free legal advice and information, especially during this time. So thank you very much to everyone who attended, and we hope to hear from you. We wish you the best of luck going forward. Bye.
Missy, can you hear us? Thank you.
Thank you. Are you guys doing it again on Wednesday? Is this the same one for Wednesday?
Yes.